Hello, everyone. I'm Nikhil Jain, uh, CEO and co-founder at Foreign Habits. And first of all, welcome to everyone to this session. Um, a big shout out and thanks to SRCC for hosting this events. And yeah, a big thank you to Tarini and Saloni to bringing out time at such short notice for the students. We are really thankful for your efforts. Uh, we started Foreign Ad. I'll just talk a little bit about why Foreign Habits. Why are we doing this kind of session and more often. So I'm sure that you must have seen or met any consultant or taken advice from your senior, and usually you would have trusted more on your senior's advice, in your journey, because they are the ones who have actually done those things which you really wanted to do. Having that kind of inspiration back in my IIT days, I started this particular venture where we are connecting Indian and any kind of students who are studying here and wanting to go abroad or for trying to pursue any kind of education at a different country or continent. They have very limited understanding. So how are we able to solve this problem? By connecting them to their target university or target course mentor, who will be able to handhold the student in the whole process, which becomes fairly a transparent kind of a system, and you get the guidance which has already been tried and tested before. Okay, so that's the whole platform. If you There are like Tarini and Saloni would be there very soon on the platform, and there are more than 250 plus mentors on our platform. Whichever mentor you would like to, you can just go ahead, see their profile, you know schedule and book a call with them and have guidance on it. So yeah, without wasting any further time, so I basically am Nikhil Jain. I graduated from IIT BHU, then I was doing my PhD from IIT Bombay and Monash University. This was certainly a calling that I figured out that this is something I really wanted to do. And last year I took a decision in my third year of my PhD. I took a drop and I came back to India and I started this venture. Definitely it was a little bold decision, but yeah, that's how entrepreneurs grew. So with the same mindset, I tried a lot. We have been doing almost like every 1 or 2 such sessions with a lot of students on different topics. And today we have come to a very special session. Because of the US pandemic, because of the whole COVID situation, a lot of students are being confused about study abroad and what countries, how do we go about it. Usually a lot of students think about study abroad being a very complex and difficult and costly process. So what are the ways that we can bust certain myths about these processes with our speakers experience. So without further ado, let me first introduce Tarini is our mentor from Canada. She's been doing her masters and in sustainable fields in UBC Stoddard Business School. And we have Saloni. Saloni happens to be one of the SRCC alumnus. So yeah, great news, guys. We got an alumnus here, and she did her masters from Oxford University, one of the very reputed university. To go ahead. So yeah, so we'll do the session in this format. I'll just explain everyone how the session is going to be. We'll first talk a little bit about profile building. What are the few pointers that you both of you feel that for a profile building, why is that important? What are the things one can do in profile building? I'm sure it's a very broad topic, but then we can boil down to certain pointers. And after that, we'll take on questions one by one based on the post graduation experiences, country preferences, and the degrees and all. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, profile building. Tarini, why don't you take the lead?
So, okay. Before I talk about like profile specific, I just want to begin with like how to choose a course. So, like when you think about choosing a course, like you have to find your why. You have to find your reason. So firstly, I feel like it's very important to find the specific course that you want to do and why you want to do that course. So, like your why, where, and what. So, for example, for me, it was I came from like an economics background, and I did a lot of marketing, finance, and HR internships during my time in my college. So I kind of wanted, more insight into what management really looks like. So for me, it was a master's in management, like that was my course. Next, I came down to, okay, so if I want to do this course, where do I want to do it from? And I sort of took that approach in like a long term, where I thought of the country that I wanted to do it in, and of course, within the country, the city where I wanted to go. So because I wanted to work once I graduated, I was, choosing universities from that lens. Secondly, like in terms of you want to do another master's, you want to do another bachelor's, or you just want to do a PG diploma, that will help you. But you have to really think about what that degree is going to add to your already, professional career. And once you've decided your why, I think things kind of, move smoothly from there on. And then you can get on to like the profile building. Then you can think about the three aspects of your specific profile, which can be your academics, your GMAT, as well as your extracurriculars, right? And I would say a good profile is something that is strong in at least two of these aspects. Like you can have great extracurriculars, you can have great academics, you might have like an okay GMAT, and the university will still accept you because as long as you're able to show that you're a good candidate, you can add value to the university, and you're able to specifically talk about the value that you bring on the table. And talking specifically about Canadian universities, like Canadian universities don't focus on academics that much. I think they really want to know you as a person, and they focus on your story, who you are, where you come from, and where you want to take it forward. And once you have your profile at hand, like these three aspects, then it comes to actually applying. So the essays are like a really big place where you can actually do the storytelling, and that's what is very, very important. Yeah, that is my 2 cents.
Yeah. I think that's a fairly good point. I got an admit from UBC only, so I could remember, SS played a huge role in that. But yeah, Saloni, what's your viewpoint? Coming from UK, Oxford, big university, what was your thing about profile building?
Sure. So firstly, I strongly agree with Tarini on the fact that you really need to know which subject and which country you want to go to, because that's one of the reasons, that's one of the factors that plays a very important role in the profile that you end up building for yourself, for your admission. So with respect to the profile building, there are basically 4 aspects that I focused on. First is having obviously a good GRE or a GMAT, whichever you want to have. Then good letter of recommendations, a good essay, and a good CV. So I'll go into each of them one by one. Starting with GMAT, GRE. So some people can be good at quant, some people can be good at verbal. I think the main key to crack GMAT and GRE is to just practice from as many sources as you can find, and also correct your mistakes, because that analysis really helps you avoid any mistakes in the future. So that was my approach to cracking these exams. Secondly, as for the essay, I think Tarini rightly mentioned that you need to have your story right, and even within the essay there are it's broadly divided into 3 factors, like why you want to do that subject, why do you want to choose that particular university, and what do you want to do after you've gotten admit in that subject in that university. So having clarity in these 3 aspects, I think, is very, very important, because ultimately the university also needs to showcase that the person that they have admitted is going to land up at a good place for the university to maintain its ranking. So you need to show the university that you have clarity on being able to employ it even after you've gotten admit. So that's very important, I feel. Thirdly, for letter of recommendations, I think instead of going for professors which are senior, I would rather suggest build a good rapport with the professors and go with the ones who know you really well, and especially the ones who teach you the subject for which you're applying. So my essay, for example, was slightly oriented towards microeconomics, which I really liked. And my letter of recommendation was also from a microeconomic professor. So those 2 kind of linked, and I could build a story around that. And finally, coming to the CV, I think that also plays a very important role. So because I had clarity in my mind from the start that I wanted to do a master's, my CV was very academically heavy. And in my college also, I focused a lot on academics versus extracurriculars. So even the extracurricular portion of my CV was mainly focused on research papers, PowerPoint, paper presentations, and quizzes. So that was very academically heavy. But I think looking back, I would rather suggest that keep a balanced approach. Have your academics to the point that they don't look bad, but also have extracurriculars which show other aspects of your personality, because these master's programs are not very long. They're 1.5 year long, and the moment you enter them, it you wouldn't even realize that they get over, and you need to start applying for placements. So you won't have the time to build your CV at that time for your placement. So you need to be ready for that as well beforehand. So I would suggest have 3 which showcase other aspects of your personality, like for example written skills, communication skills, or business skills. So being balanced in all these 4, I think, would be quite helpful, and that's what I was approaching while I was applying.
Interesting. Yeah, I think balance is always a good thing, but not everyone gets to maintain the balance. After second year, third year, usually look back,
Right.
okay, there has been an imbalance. Okay, so what are your suggestions on how to manage that?
I think you have to be just consistent, have specific targets on a day-to-day basis. So if you're preparing for GRE or GMAT, be specific that you need to do 40 questions every day. I think that consistency really helps. And when you have that kind of a balanced profile, I think it really shows to the university that you are really good at time management also. Because you can't balance everything without having a good time management skill. So implicitly it shows another skill of yours. So I think having specific targets really helps in getting there.
Interesting. So I believe at SRCC we have predominantly 15 years of education. One thing that has been more interesting. Specifically, I'll right now move to Tarin because there's a one big myth we've been discussing on call that we might need to bust. With 15 years of education being not very popular to go masters, they end up struggling. Like I've personally spoken to a lot of people from Delhi University, and they said, sir, I think I need to do MCom or MSc and then probably I'll get a university. So what are your opinion, in this kind of situation where people have 15 years of education and they want to, go for their masters right away after that? Because a lot of reasons comes into this particular picture. I'll just tell you from our experience of talking to students, either there is a need for a brand, either there's a need for a, quality education or exposure, which is being the number one choice among the students why they want to go abroad is exposure. So with that 15 years of thing, how do you see that? Is it a bad thing to go, is it possible for students to go after their bachelor's, or what do they prepare? How was your thing, your journey in that?
Yeah, great question, Nikhil. And I also kind of struggled with the same issue while I was initially looking at Canada, because a lot of universities that the first website that I opened and I looked for admission requirements, the first thing it said we want a 4-year undergrad, and I was quite taken aback. And so the person who was guiding me, the first thing he sort of got me to do was he was the one to bust my myth, and he actually helped me. His approach was, they say they want 4 years, but they take people who have 3 years of education. So I did my bachelor's from DU. I had only 3 years of education, and all I had to do was write a mail to the university, sending them my transcript and saying, listen, I just have 3 years of education, am I eligible to apply to your university? And most of the universities that I sent this to actually were pretty okay with me applying within 3 years of education. So no, you don't need a 4 years of education when you're applying to universities in Canada, but you obviously and definitely need to confirm with the university if they are ready to accept you with the 3 years of education. And for that, you need to write a mail to the admissions team. And that's actually one of the best tips that I got when I was looking for my college.
Absolutely. I think this is a eye opener for me also. So, Salon, what's your take? In UK, does it work out for 15 years of education, or is it still preferred to have 16 years of education?
While undergrad in UK actually is 3 years of education only. So they don't have any strict rule with respect to having 15 or 16 years of education. I think they're pretty open to taking 15 years of education.
Okay, that's great. I think UK definitely has a little upper hand here. Okay, so now let's get back to something as a bigger choice. Why did you choose UK as being one of the target country for you to go? What was the mindset, thought process? Can you just tell a little bit about that?
Firstly was my subject. So I was quite inclined towards microeconomics and finance. And UK, US were one of the two areas which are like really heavy on finance, being the London and the Wall Street area. So I think my primary reason was being closer to the center so that I get more practical exposure in the subject. So that was my idea of choosing UK.
Okay, and Tarini, what was your thought about choosing?
About choosing Canada?
Yes, absolutely.
So a couple of reasons. I was like, when I started looking for universities, one thing that I was really clear in my mind was that once I've completed my degree, I sort of want to get the return on my investment and I want to work for a couple of years. So I kind of took that lens and that approach when I started applying for colleges. Also, there were a couple of other reasons why I thought Canada was a great choice. Like language was never an issue. And diversity is something that is really celebrated in Canada as a country, and they had very friendly and easy immigration rules. And for like the next couple of years, also there are a country that are looking for immigrants, looking for good, talented people to come and join their workforce. And that was a big plus from my end, and yeah, that's about it.
Okay, interesting. So one quick question to both of you: if not UK or if not Canada, for any reason, then how would you have prepared for any other country? Like you may have, or you were just very much restricted. I want to go to only Canada.
Saloni, do you want to go for that first?
Sure. So I think I had US as an option that I was considering. So there were few universities which I did look at, and I saw people going there with 15 years of education. So I was considering US as an alternate option, if not UK.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for me, likewise, I was considering US as an option, and I also considered Singapore. But with US, the thing was that I was getting the same kind of work visa duration with US as well as Canada. But with US, like I was hearing a lot that they do not give enough jobs to international students, and that was sort of like, and with Trump, the whole political situation was kind of constantly pulling me back to sort of go and invest money, which is actually twice as much. Like the education and my including my living expenses and everything would have been twice as much as what I would have spent in Canada, and my return on investment would have still been very uncertain. And similarly with Singapore, I got into a great university, but then again, they also have the same idea where they prefer citizens to give jobs, and that was that would have kind of pulled back me from achieving my ROI. So that is how I decided on Canada.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a fairly good choice. Is ultimately you would want a job in the end after your masters. So let's focus a little bit on your degrees. Your degree education. Okay, you have lived in in Canada. You just graduated from UBC. So congratulations for that. So we want to know both from you and Tarini, Saloni, from Saloni and Tarini. Okay, I'm a little bit messed up here. Sorry. So yeah. So what kind of degrees are being now more popular that you see? In terms of the employment perspectives. Where you believe UK or Canada, are booming currently as per the employments, where students can, even look towards unconventional degrees, or even in the conventional, how to pick and choose a particular degree. It's a very, general question that I've been asked a lot of times, what to pursue. And trust me, this is a question not even from students. People with 6-7 years of work experience are also clueless about that. So how do you think about, what kind of thought process to be put? And currently in your countries, what kind of areas are becoming more prominent in terms of employments?
Okay, so for Canada, lots of things actually. You can look at the IT sector. You can go for courses such as business analytics. Like there's a lot of need for people in tech. You can go for, speaking of tech, you can go in for something like biotech. These are like good booming industries. At the same time, natural resource industries, sustainability is becoming like a really big theme in that. It has been for a while, but it's still growing. Like in India, we're figuring out this this topic of sustainability. Canada is sort of way ahead and they're kind of progressing forward in that sense. And there's a lot of I would say disruption in like banking and finance sectors, and so that's also a sector you can look at. But then again, like, this is only how much I know, and this is kind of where like individual research kicks in.
Yes.
And you would really have to dig deep into what field that you like and what are the opportunities that are available in that country that you want to go to.
Okay.
I think firstly, talking about the number of applications, I think this year they're going to increase quite massively, because given that the job market is not doing well, people would want to rather spend a year or two studying and upgrading themselves. Having said that, I think it's very important that you go for what you really are interested in, because with the increase in number of applications, the competition is going to massively increase. And especially in UK, I think in UK, subjects like economics, finance, management, London being the finance hubs, these subjects are very, very popular. And again, given the increasing number of applications, it becomes increasingly difficult to differentiate yourself and get admit. So I think one should not go for what is becoming popular, but one should rather research and see what they actually want to go into. And I think that would be a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise way to choose, because trends may vary, but your interest will not, in that sense. Okay, now let's get back to your your student life. How was the living experience for you at Oxford? What are the learning experiences that you had spent with your couple of years in Oxford? So can you tell a little bit about that, and then probably we'll get into a little bit of living expenses and all those numbers.
Sure. So if I compare it with SRCC, I think it was very, very different. So SRCC, I was a rather academically oriented student, being in classes all the time and studying. But I think Oxford really gave me the exposure of the practical aspects of what I actually wanted to do. So we used to have regular networking events with industry leaders in different industries. So every week you would have directors or VPs coming from management consulting companies, investment bankings, and other industries that you would want to try your hand to. So I think that exposure really made me see and made me understand what I wanted to go into. But apart from that, I think just interacting with such a wide, vast cohort of people from different countries, I think that really it just helps you become a different person altogether, in the sense that your mindset becomes much more wider. You start to try out different things. You're not restricted to just being in class and listening to the professor. That's obviously an important thing, but I think to build an overall personality, it's very important to interact with different kinds of people as well, which is something I think Oxford very well gave a good exposure to.
Okay. And what about the how did you manage your budgeting and expenses? Like, were you funded or were you self-funded? How did you go about managing? Because that's, again, expense management is a big deal.
Yeah, I think I was fully self-funded. There was no scholarship for me, but it is expensive, no doubt about that. But I think you just need to approach it with the way that, okay, target something that you feel is going to get you back what you're spending. So I did an internship in London post my graduation. That, for example, that obviously doesn't fully cover what I spent, but that to some extent was a good stipend that I got. And then obviously, because I knew I was going into the sector that I'm actually interested in, I was confident that I would be able to like get my ROI within a decent amount of time. So I think ultimately it's important that you go with a clear mindset of what you want to do and where you want to end up.
Absolutely. So if we I'll just do a follow-on question here. So if we spread the costs here, what was the usual living costs in London? On a monthly expense, what a candidate should look at to spend if they are going for London or UK in general?
Monthly, I would say 1.5 lakh per month. Easily, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Cool then. So over to Tarini. So how about Canada? You just graduated, so definitely a lot of things going on in the budget and expense management. How did you go about it?
So, like Saloni, I was self-funded, no scholarship. And in terms of like living expenses, I would say like very similar. Like I think within so here's the thing for me, like if you're living closer to campus, your expense is higher because like especially talking about UBC and Vancouver, like the closer you are to campus, the more secluded you are from the city. So in that way, like your expense can be higher or lower depending on where you are geographically placed, right? So I think it's like maybe 1.5 lakh is like 1.5 lakh would be like the upper budget. Like that's the max you would be spending per month on your food, on your utilities, on your rental accommodation.
Interesting. So because I've never honestly, like I've been always a scholarship student, so it didn't got me a proper understanding of this, but I think this is much valuable information for a lot of students who plan to take up loan, and expense management is really interesting. So coming to the student part-time jobs, I'm sure there would be a lot of part-time opportunities on campus, off campus. Can you throw some light on this, Tarini, and then Saloni?
So speaking on campus, like we had a lot of opportunities. The best thing I found was to find your subject of interest, approach your professor who's teaching that subject, because all of my professors were also, working professionals conducting their research side by side or like working in consulting companies. So one thing that you can do specifically is approach your professors, ask for an internship. Another system that we have was like becoming a teacher assistant, which is where you help them, structure their courses, which is where you help them grade the papers, and that was open university wide. So you had the option not just to connect with your professors, but also to professors across the university and your school. Speaking of still on campus, like there are a lot of restaurants on campus, there are a lot of opportunities on campus that you can get involved in, that you can work part-time in. And I think off campus you can find yourself similarly, like you can find yourself an internship, you can again find yourself a restaurant that you can work on campus. And I think the pay can range anywhere between $16 to $18 per hour. And as an international student, the maximum that you can work is 20 hours per week. And trust me, like when you go there and you go for like a 1 year program or even like a 1.5 year program, it's tough to manage yourself initially, because you're like, if you're someone who's never stepped out of your house before like I was, it's gonna take you an initial like minimum of 3 months to get used to the country, to get used to the culture, and to sort of just settle in your routine of like education, university, and home, to like rental and stuff. But that being said, like once you're settled in, like look for opportunities. There's nothing that you can't do, but it's just how much you're willing to extend yourself in that duration, where you're able to manage both the things, like your academics, your networking, you finding a job, as well as you doing a part-time job.
Okay, interesting. So Saloni, like your thoughts?
I think the structure is similar in UK. You can work for 20 hours per week, and there are opportunities in the line of research assistants and other supermarkets that are available. But again, managing time is extremely difficult. Like I remember going there, having no time left even to eat properly, because in the morning till lunch you have classes, then you eat your lunch in like 15 minutes, and then you go for like so we used to have other classes in the area of subject that you're interested in. Those were like optional classes, but like if you opted in, you had to go. Then those would get over like another 2-3 hours, and then you would have a networking session in the evening. So the entire day would just go in a click. So there would be no time left for all these part-time jobs. And even on the weekend, you would have pending work for the week to complete on. So for me, at least, I had no time left to look at these part-time during the course internships.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's very tricky if you're going for a 1 year. Definitely
Yeah.
advise to students focus on your academics, because these
Right.
part-time jobs could be a part-time thing. You need to get a job, a real job,
Yeah.
probably.
Plus,
So,
you
yeah.
start in September, and I remember going in September and seeing that people have already started applying for jobs for the next year. So the race just starts immediately as soon as you enter.
Wow, that's
That's
an
very
eye
true.
opener.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, for students, definitely be on your toes if you're going there. Okay, let's get to something very interesting, which every student aspires for. Scholarships. Okay, how was your experience? I understand that you didn't get a scholarship, but what are the other scholarships that students can look at? What different varieties of scholarships that students usually don't understand, because trust me, I've come through the market research. Students are not aware about it even.
Right.
So what's your awareness that you came to know? Can you share a little bit?
I think in my case, like you rightly said, like I wasn't aware of so many scholarships that are actually available. Like for Indian students itself, there are scholarships in Oxford. So I think research is the thing that one needs to do at their own end to figure out what all scholarships are there. Talk to seniors who've gotten scholarships, and obviously just do an extensive research. That's the only way you can figure out. But yeah.
Absolutely. And are there any fee waivers or anything that from the university can you expect or something like that?
As in post you've started your
Yeah, internally, are there any other scholarship, like after you getting admitted, could you work on something as a scholarship and get your fees reduced or something?
Nothing that I came across during my time.
Interesting. So yeah, Tarini, how's your scholarship narrative?
So, like Salon, like I applied really late. So I started applying in the third round of their admit. So I think that was one of the disadvantages at my end. But also, like Saloni, I wasn't aware enough to what opportunities are actually there, and like I'm sure they put you in for like an automatic consideration where with your admission you're considered for a scholarship. If that doesn't happen, then at UBC you have a plethora of outside scholarships that the university gives you like access to once they've accepted you, and that's up to like individual discretion to kind of apply or not apply. In terms of being within the program and getting a scholarship, so UBC and specifically my program, they had this scholarship for excellent leadership, which was given to one of my batchmates, and that is one of it. So I can't specifically speak about like other schools and opportunities, but this has been my experience at UBC.
I understand. So for Canada, there are tons of scholarships. Just as an eye opener for students, there are like Varnier is one of the one which I applied, couldn't get into, but Lal Bahadur Shastri for Indian students for masters and PhD, if they're looking at, there are tons of opportunities. And then yes, you can definitely get a fee waiver from the university itself. Okay, this is I'm just trying to people a little bit of information here, but yeah. Okay, so you have already answered, like if not Canada and UK. So let's get to the current situation. The most important fear among the students is, after pandemic, there have been news about universities charging exorbitant fees online, increasing the fees online, and then how's the that's something came to, I think today itself in the news, that a lot of universities across the world, not just Canada and UK, have started to increase their tuition fees, for the online education. So how do you see, as an international student, how do they plan for it, as a senior to junior talk? Okay, so how do you gonna advise them that, okay, you may have to look into these considerations if it's going to be online or hybrid, and what are your current situation thoughts, starting from Tarini, and then Saloni can take a lead.
Okay, so I actually like the last 3 months of my program, I had to shift to a completely online curriculum very abruptly. and then like our professors and teachers, like everybody was really unprepared for it, but we had to sort of roll with with the way things were happening. So like if you are starting a program from where you are, like if you're not able to fly to a country, like you will be missing out on things such as, the on ground experience, getting to meet your people, knowing, like, that face to face interaction. It is different for sure, no doubt. But at the same time, like I found that there was no difference in the quality of education that was imparted to me online. So that was a big plus from my end. Like I didn't feel like my money went to waste. And as far as your point of maybe the raising fees, like I don't know about it. But then if it's being raised to an exorbitant amount, and if you can sort of compare the past and previous amounts, and you feel that it's not fair, like I won't say invest in it. Rather, take a year off, spend it any other way that you can, invest in yourself, and then look at applying forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is kind of my take on it.
Sure. Yeah, sorry.
So, firstly, I think I haven't heard of any university increasing the fee, but definitely I haven't heard of any decreasing either. So, I think two aspects to it. One, if you've already gotten an admit and you have made up your mind that you're going to go, and if it's a 1-year program, I would say that okay, quality of education won't make a difference, but make sure that you interact with your peers proactively, talk to them online, chat with them, have continuous Zoom casual chats, because I think that's a really important aspect of your international education. Really, if you're considering to apply, I would say rather take an off-year like Tarani mentioned, irrespective of the fee, because just the experience of going there and managing everything, and there are just so many things that you do for the first time. I think that cannot be replaced with an online education, because classes are just a very insignificant part of what you do there. So
Absolutely.
do something else, take an off-year, try something on your own, start up something, or maybe do a job, do an internship. I think that would be much more valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the very important point, because I completely understand, because it's the exposure that we go for, that cross-cultural and diverse exposure is really important. But yeah, good news, not to scare everyone off, but yeah, a lot of colleges have moved towards hybrid, especially in UK and Canada, and Australia have taken a big step, offering 2 years of work visa, even if your college is doing online or hybrid education. So yeah, they would be, but yeah, try to look for your specific college if they are offering the course completely online or hybrid. In that way, you still have a chance to go and study there. Okay, so one very interesting point I think Saloni mentioned was your payback period and ROI. And being a Marwadi and a true Marwadi, a lot of students also resemble to this. How can I measure my ROI of the course? How do you plan on, figuring out what was your thought process? Okay, this is the kind of course, this is the kind of country, this is how I'm gonna, evaluate 1 year. I'll do the maths probably, or guesswork. So how was your understanding of ROI, and how students can look for, evaluating their ROIs?
I think in the simplest terms, it's just the payback period and how much time are you going to get paid back what you invested. So for me, it was that if you get a job in London, the payback period is not more than a year. But if you have to come back, then it can extend to 2 years. So I had done my calculations prior to going there, and I was aware of the fact. But again, you have to choose, like the fight for job in London is obviously there. So you have to take into consideration that as well.
Absolutely. I've been to London Business School, and speaking to their graduates, I could feel that it is difficult. Yeah,
true.
Okay. Tarani, what's your thoughts? You just graduated. How are you going to, evaluate on this?
So, like very similar to Saloni, I'd kind of done my calculation before, and you can easily, like, if you have a specific job role in mind, you can easily, there's a lot of information on web that you can go and search for the similar pay scale in Canada for those roles. and you can just work backwards to calculate your ROI. So I'd done it, and for me the ROI was somewhere around 2 to 3 years. And like I said, like I was very prepared, and I went with the idea that I want to work once I've graduated.
Okay.
So that's how I sort of made my decision.
Yeah, I think this is it. Now let's open up for the Q&As. So we have first question coming from one of the students, from Tarini, and okay, from Saloni and Tarini both. Okay, what about MIM program from HEC Paris and LBS? Why did you not think about those? Like, what is the MIM program benefits in Europe? And for Saloni specifically, about how are the potentials for MIM programs in London or UK in general? So whoever wants to take this can start, and I'll shift it.
Okay. Do you want to start first?
No, I think you already started.
Okay. So for me, if I talk about myself, like I mentioned, I was clear on the subject that I had interest in. So I really focused on what courses I wanted my subject to have. And MIM was a more management focused subject, so I did not consider it. But having said that, I have come across people who've done courses in MIM from LBS. And I think one advantage that you have being in LBS is that you're closer to the city. So the chances of networking are much higher. And one thing I noticed is that when you're doing a course, say in LBS or LSE, for example, or Cambridge or Oxford, I think what course you do does not matter much for your employment. For your employment, what matters is that you're doing well what you're doing and that you have an all-round personality. That is what they look at. Course is something that is your choice and that is of your interest. But from an employment perspective, again, repeating myself, they look at how well you're doing what you're doing.
Interesting. That's a cool thoughts. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's begin with HEC, and I'm assuming you're asking about HEC Paris. So for me, I kind of already vetoed countries that had like a different language, because I'd heard from a lot of people who went and studied that language sort of became a bigger criteria when you went out looking for a job. And I know friends who are studying in France right now, and like this, I hear the same things, like you need to know the language that is the primary language of the country. And if you've studied French and if you think you want to learn that language, great, like go ahead. That's something that people do, but it's also a very personal choice. Technically with LBS, I didn't apply there. Why? Because I didn't think I had that great a GMAT score, even though I had a great profile otherwise to get through an LBS. And at the same time, like I'd heard very similar things for UK during my period of application, that it's very difficult to get a job. So I kind of didn't want to put myself in the position where I know where I'm going and I know it's already difficult to get a job there. I just didn't want to do that, because I know what I'm good at, but I don't want to struggle as a great person with a great profile. I land up in a country where I know, I'm not going to get this job. So that being said, like LBS is a great school, they give you great exposure, but again, personal choice. And did I answer your question? Yes. And in, speaking in terms of MIM as a course, like, and taking it back to sort of Canada. So a lot of colleges in Canada don't take people with business profiles, like people with business education, because their idea of a master's in management is somebody coming from a non-business.
The right time to apply, and when should one take a GMAT? Okay, something like a universal question, but yes, please answer this. Yes, Tarini, you can start, and then Saloni will pick it up.
Okay, what was the second part of your question you said?
When is the right time to apply to the universities, and based on that, when should one take GMAT or GRE, or IELTS or TOEFL, based on whatever you have given?
So normally admissions open starting from anywhere between August to September. And I would say start applying when you have all your chicks in order. Like you have your GMAT at hand, you have your IELTS in hand, you have, you're able to build a story. Go ahead and apply. So if you're planning to apply in the first round, make sure you have your GMAT by the end of by mid-July. Keep like that space of like 10 days where if you don't get a first attempt, you can sort of go back, try again, take those 10 days and try to get an increased score. And especially speaking in terms of Canada, like an IELTS is not very important because I got through in my university without an IELTS. I just had to show them enough proof that I had done 3 years of education from an English institution, as English being the main language of medium. Yeah, apply when you have your chicks in order, man. Like there's no rush. Like even if you're applying in the second or third round, you'll get through as long as the university sees the value in having you.
And here, so I think apply to your favorite universities as soon as possible. But for that, obviously make sure all your checklists are done, because if you apply an incomplete application, that would be as good as not applying. So if you're very, very eager to get into one particular university, start ahead. And as to when it's the right time to give a GRE or GMAT, I think that depends on your current level of ability in quant and verbal. So give a mock without a preparation, and that will give you a good idea of where you stand, and then you can plan your preparation accordingly. For IELTS, again, even I didn't have to give IELTS because SRCC normally gives a letter which says that every exam and all the medium of education was English, and that is accepted in the UK as long as your college gives a letter. So even I didn't have to give IELTS.
That's a great news for a lot of students who just stress upon IELTS and TOEFL. Okay.
But again, you have to check with your university to which you're applying if they accept such a letter. So I had emailed my university beforehand to check if they're going to accept the letter, and then I can apply going forward.
Okay. So again, similar question that we missed out probably. What's a good GRE or GMAT score if you're going for business, economics, or financial courses in UK?
Best way to figure that out is to go to the university website and see what the average score is. So I think that average score is a very good indication of what kind of score the university admits.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very similar answer. Actually, the exact same.
So someone said that he has applied to 2 UK university and York University for MSc Finance and University of Exeter for MSc Financial Analysis and Fund Management. Which university is semi-target for banking or finance jobs in UK? So he doesn't have a work ex like a fresher, a very typical scenario. Freshers wanting to get into banking and finance. What kind of universities in UK they must target, or what could be the strategy to target a university? Because I'm sure we can't fix a university name, but what should be a strategy to target that?
I think addressing the question, he's asking about what is a semi-target university for banking and finance, right?
Yes.
So I think what I experienced was that there are people there in the UK who've taken 1-year drop year and done 3 to 4 internships in big banks. So you're competing against those people. So if you don't have any work ex in banking or finance sector, I would say it's a very, very hard call unless you have something very extraordinary to get you an interview invitation.
Okay, interesting. So I think the next question is specifically for Tarini because it's talking about MIM. What are the MIM programs would you recommend if employment is the main thing one has in their mind? And how do you compare the ROI across these MIM programs? And how would you compare the ROI with 2+2 deferred MBA program, which is one of the very big competitor to MIM also nowadays?
Okay, great question. I think I looked at. I think I would recommend Ireland as a country in terms of like getting the opportunity to work there and getting the ROI. And what was the next part?
So employment-wise, what kind of MIM programs would you recommend? And how do you compare the ROI across 1 or 2 MIM let's say from Germany, WHO versus St. Gallen versus MIM and UBC. So how do we compare the ROIs usually? What's your strategy there?
Okay, so say suppose right now you want to do an MIM and you have the rough idea of wanting to do a finance job. So let's pick a role of like a financial analyst, and you can simply go to that specific country, and there are websites like Glassdoor that give you like an idea of what the average pay scale, like a range. So you kind of work backwards with the tuition fee of that institution, with a job that you will find what that job pay will give you, and then you work backwards to get like an ROI.
Absolutely, the reverse engineering works here. I've done it like back and forth a lot of times.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one question is again, this might be a little tricky question. You may choose to answer, you may choose to skip, your choice. Is it important, or is it something being advised to hire a consultant for your study abroad, like writing essays and all? What's your thought on this? Because I understand there have been a lot of boutique consultancies, a lot of platforms, probably like us also, who've been helping students. Okay, so is it like an important thing? Does it help you, or does it not help you? It's a very subjective question here, so you can choose to answer. What's your thought?
So speaking from my own experience, I did hire a consultant who helped me throughout, like my sort of shortlisting universities with me, essays and applications. But then again, it's a very personal choice. I feel like if you are somebody who's confident with essay writing, with what you bring to the table, and you feel like you've done enough research to sort of know what all is out there, then go ahead, do it yourself. But at the same time, if you're somebody who works better with more help, and if you feel like that like a counselor or a consultant will sort of help you go where you want to go, then I feel there's no harm in you getting those resources. But at the same time, all of these counselors, like, they are very happy to hold for free first meetings in where they'll guide you, and they'll probably give you more information than you're thinking of. So my suggestion would also be, before you go to a counselor, like, go to like 5 different counselors. Okay, like, there's so many at this time offering this their help. Just go to 5 different counselors, sit down with them and be like, okay, so maybe like take 1 course, 2 course, 3 courses, and be like, these are the courses that I'm for. This is what I have in my mind for the long term. What is your suggestion? Just sort of throw the floor open to them and see what they come back with. That way, it's a great opportunity for you to test their knowledge, and it's a great opportunity for you to get to know that are they thinking any different from what you're thinking? Is there something that they know that you don't already know? And if you feel that then their help is valuable to you, take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tarini, what's your thought on this?
So I didn't hire any consultant, but my approach was to reach out to seniors and to students who are already studying in the universities that I'm targeting. So I think seniors were quite helpful in having a look at my essays and helping me improve where I thought I was lagging. So I really found that helpful, but I wouldn't have a consultant experience to talk about.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think from my perspective, I personally, since I'm running the platform, I'll be very honest about it. Okay, I did everything with our seniors' help. I was very much privileged to get amazing seniors and even professors as my seniors who could help me with every process. But yes, it took a lot of time. If you're doing everything by yourself, be prepared to do all those researches. There might be some mistakes also. Be ready for those areas. I missed my MIT application because of that reason, and it's very much daunting sometimes. But yeah, it's something that you have to accept that fact. Seniors guidance definitely is important. So probably if you're going for Oxford in some time future, you may reach out, whom you want to reach out. So yeah, so that's something is important. Talking about the consultant, I can definitely throw some pointers here, because I have spoken to a lot during our market research understand how they think about a particular course, and are they, and also get to know, this is a hack, what are the university types that do they have, and are their recommendations is an overall recommendation, or is it from a very small specific subset of universities that they are only tied up with? Because you don't want to end up a biased recommendation. Someone is trying to go to Oxford may land up in Canada because of a biased recommendation, something I would not recommend you to have. So have a very open choice and open discussion with your consultants. If they're comfortable doing that, they might be the right persons for you. So yeah, I think the last question that we are addressing, probably two questions here. I've done an internship at a bank in my first year, have a good CGPA in college, have done tons of online courses and extracurricular activities. So my profile is in progress, but my quant is weak. So when it comes to GMAT or GRE, how do I go about it for MIM and UK? So yeah, both of you might have to answer.
So I would suggest Google different sources for GRE, GMAT, quant. They are like tens of thousands of questions. Do a particular set of questions on a daily basis and correct your mistakes. I think that's something that really helped me a lot. So I don't know any other way to improve.
Okay, so I think there's this website, now I'm forgetting the name, it's called GMAT Club.
Yeah.
And basically you're supposed to like Google your question and they give you like a step-by-step response now to go about it. So a very good strategy if you feel that you're weak in quant would be to take the question that you attempted incorrectly, take it to the website and understand the step-by-step approach, and then compare it to what you did while you attempted that question, and then sort of have like an Excel sheet where you sort of writing and understanding question by question of your different approach and the correct approach, and then maybe over time that can sort of help you understand and hone your skill in quant.
Something similar that I also did, like instead of an Excel sheet, I had a different copy where I would write down all my incorrect questions, so that at the end of every month I would practice those incorrect questions, so that I would just get reinforced with what my mistakes were. So that also really helped.
Yeah, I think I did the same during my quota days of IIT JEE preparations. Whatever mistakes that we used to commit in the exams, we used to come back, make an understanding of why did I do this, and make a list of like expense as honest mistakes. And this helps. So the last question that we have, it's a very basic question about what are the things that top universities like Oxford, MIT, Harvard, LBS looks into your profile. Yeah, so that's a very broad and open question, but yeah, this is the fine question.
There's no one specific thing that they look at. I think going back to my first answer, it's very important to have a balance between your CV, your essay, your GRE, GMAT score, and your LOR. And all of them shouldn't be separate. They should all tie together to tell a unique and different story. So I think if all of them are balanced and strong, then it becomes a very strong case for the university to consider you.
Okay.
Yeah, and to specifically add to your answer, they don't just look at what's on paper, they kind of look at who you are, if you're somebody who's taking initiative, if you're somebody who's a team member, because they basically what they want to understand is that when you get there, are you a fit for their university? Are you somebody who will fit into the kind of cohort that they have, right? So if you're able to sort of portray yourself as an ideal candidate, and maybe not even an ideal candidate, actually, if you're able to show what uniqueness that you bring to the table, I think that's the best part. And if they want to take you, they'll take you.
Yep, I think this was the last question. So probably one last note about what do you want to give as a message or suggestion to the incoming study abroad aspirants. What's your message, Tarini?
I would just say it's great that you're thinking about your future and you're really serious about what you want to do. Just start with your why. It's very important why you want to do what you want to do, and once you figure that out, it's just like, it's a tough road, but like keep trying, you will get there, and don't lose heart if you don't get where you want to go, because wherever you end up, it'll be great too.
I think on similar lines, I would say that it's great that you're considering an international education, because it really makes it different in who you end up being as a person. And on that note, I would say just be very consistent when you're applying, because the whole process can be very draining. So don't take everything to heart, but at the same time, make sure you're consistent and have specific set of goals to go towards, because you don't want to be vague as to where you're going towards. So have a list of things you need to work on and just consistently go towards that route.
Fantastic. I think this was pretty much interesting, and I got to know at least a lot of things about UK and Canada. So probably for my MBA in future, I may look up to you guys to help me out. But yeah, great session, guys, and thank you, Saloni and Tarini. Thank you very much to be on this call, and a lot of students, because this is something I personally faced, and I am sure you would agree that when you started your journey, you would have also looked for a good mentor or a good person to look up to for your career guidance, and this has been an amazing session for all of us. So thank you, everyone, and for this note, we'll end the session. And probably Saloni and Tarini, once they're available, they might be on Foreign Admits platform as a mentor. So if you want to book a call with them, you can always find them and even many more mentors on foreignadmits.com. Thank you, everyone.